Just. Not on a Tuesday.
The throne room of the Vashtarai Dominion smelled like ozone and burnt incense, which was fitting, because in about 4 minutes I was going to be formally accused of high treason against an empire I had voluntarily joined 11 months ago. My name is Corin Ashdown. I was the 3rd human ever appointed as a liaison officer to a non-human government, and up until this particular Tuesday, yes, it really was a Tuesday, I'll get to why that matters. My tenure had been almost boringly successful. Trade agreements signed, cultural misunderstandings smoothed over. One minor incident involving a diplomatic gift of Earth hot sauce that nearly caused an interspecies incident. But we don't talk about that. The Vashtarai are a proud species, tall and silver-scale, with 3 jointed fingers and eyes like polished obsidian that never quite blink at the same time you expect them to. Their society runs on a court structure, lifted almost wholesale from feudal tradition, complete with a reigning monarch, a council of nobles, and a rigid cast of guards who stood at the room's edges like silver statues that occasionally remembered how to hold spears. The monarch in question was Queen Thessaline Vorketh, 7th of her line, and she was not, as a rule, a woman who enjoyed surprises. Ambassador Ashdown. Her voice carried the particular resonance that only came from vocal cords built for 3 registers at once. You stand accused of transmitting classified fleet movement data to a rival power. The Council has reviewed the evidence. The penalty, should you be found guilty, is death by the old rites. I stood in the center of the chamber, hands loosely clasped behind my back, doing my absolute best impression of a man who was not currently doing math on how many guards stood between me and the nearest exit. Spoiler, it was 11. 11 guards. I'd counted twice. Your Majesty, I said, I'd like to see this evidence. A noble I recognized, Lord Vren Callistor, 3rd seat on the council. A man who had lost a trade dispute to me 4 months prior and had been about as gracious about it as a scalded cat, stepped forward with a data slate glowing pale blue in his silver hand. The evidence, he said, with the particular relish of a man who has been waiting a long time to say something, is irrefutable. Fleet coordinates transmitted from the human embassy's communication array 3 nights past, to a receiver registered to the Threll Combine. The Threll Combine, our closest thing to a rival trading bloc in this sector. If I'd actually done what he was describing, it wouldn't just be treason. It would be the kind of treason that started wars. 3 nights ago, I repeated slowly. Which night precisely? The night of the 4th cycle rotation, Vren said, like I was stupid for asking. As clearly logged. I did the math in my head. Vashtarai cycle rotations didn't map neatly onto Earth days, which was going to become extremely relevant in about 90 seconds, and felt something click into place. Not proof, not yet. Just a thread. And when you've spent 11 months as the only human on an alien homeworld, you learn to pull every thread you find, because sometimes the thread is the only rope you've got. Right, I said, before we get into all this. Can I ask when, exactly, this execution would be scheduled for? Assuming the worst, the Queen's obsidian eyes narrowed, both of them landing on me a half-second apart, which was somehow more unsettling than if they'd moved together. The old rites are performed at the 2nd dawn following sentencing, she said, which would be the day your species designates as. She consulted something, a small earpiece translator that fed her Earth calendar terms she'd learned for exactly this kind of diplomatic occasion. Tuesday. I nodded slowly, like she'd just confirmed a hotel reservation. Ah, Tuesday. Gotcha. Just want to make sure I've got the scheduling right before we go any further with all this. So just to clarify, you're saying you'd like to execute me on a Tuesday? There was a pause. Yes, said the Queen, in the tone of someone repeating themselves to a child. Is that a problem? I let out a long breath through my nose. The kind of sigh a man gives when someone's told him his flight got moved to the one day of the week he specifically didn't want. Do you have to do it on a Tuesday? Because, honestly, any other day works fine for me. Wednesday. Sure. Thursday. I'm free. Even Monday if you're really eager. Just not a Tuesday. Bad history there. For humans, I mean. I heard armor shift. I heard, distinctly, one of the 11 guards take an audible step backward. The whole court went quiet. Here is a thing I did not know. Standing in that chamber, with my heart doing a fairly impressive drum solo against my ribs, the Vashtarai had, 6 years prior to my posting, made brief and disastrous first contact with a splinter faction of humans, a rogue mining consortium operating illegally near a border system, running under no flag and answering to no government. That contact had ended in a firefight that cost the Vashtarai 11 soldiers and one very expensive orbital platform. The humans in question had, according to Vashtarai historical record, referred to their own final, desperate, successful counterattack, the one that turned a losing battle into a rout, using a single phrase repeated over their comms in the chaos that the Vashtarai had never been able to fully translate or forget. Not on a Tuesday. Not today. Nobody in the Dominion had ever gotten a straight answer on what it meant. Some scholars theorized it was a war cry. Others thought it might be some kind of ritual invocation, a sacred day humans refused to lose on. The linguists had written entire papers on. The military had, in fact, quietly adjusted several tactical doctrines around the assumption that humans fought with disproportionate, borderline supernatural ferocity, specifically on Tuesdays, and that provoking a human on that day was considered, in certain classified briefing, inadvisable. I did not know any of this. I want to be extremely clear about this. I was making a joke about how nobody likes getting bad news at the start of the work week. That's it. That's the whole thing. Somewhere in a break room on Earth, a rogue miner 3 systems away from anyone who could stop them had made the exact same joke 6 years earlier in the middle of a battle. Because humans make jokes about Mondays and Tuesdays constantly and always have. And it is deeply, profoundly funny to us, in a way that apparently does not translate. But I didn't know that. All I knew was that Lord Vren Callistor had gone the color of old ash, that 2 of the 11 guards had lowered their spears slightly. Not in aggression but in the universal body language of, please do not make this worse, and that Queen Thessaline Vorkethrin had risen half out of her throne. Say that again, she said. Say what again? The day. What you said about the day. I decided, in the grand tradition of humans everywhere, who sense they've stumbled onto leverage without understanding why, to lean into it rather than explain it away. I said I'd prefer not to be executed on a Tuesday, I said, slowly, evenly, like I was choosing each word with great care, which I absolutely was, because I still had no idea what I just triggered. Humans have history with Tuesdays. I'd rather not get into it. Let's just say it doesn't tend to go well for anyone involved when a human is pushed on that particular day. The court erupted into the kind of controlled chaos that only happens in rooms full of people trained since childhood not to show emotion. Council members leaned toward each other, hissing in low Vashtarai dialect, too fast for my translator earpiece to fully parse. I caught fragments: the border incident, the mining platform, the phrase. He said the phrase, and understood, with the slow dawning horror of a man realizing he's accidentally holding a live grenade, that I had said something that meant a great deal more to this room than it meant to me. Queen Thessaline lifted one silver hand, and the chamber fell silent again, faster this time, with an edge of genuine unease that hadn't been there 5 minutes earlier. Ambassador, she said, and her voice had lost some of its earlier certainty. Are you telling this court that you are invoking the same warning given by the humans at Threll's Edge? Threll's Edge, the border system, the battle. I filed the name away for later, kept my face perfectly, deliberately calm, and did the only thing a diplomat with no idea what's happening but a decent read on a room can do. I said nothing. I just looked at her, steady, and let the silence do the talking. Silence, it turns out, is the best lie a human can tell an alien who doesn't know our tells yet. Here's the thing about accidentally becoming terrifying. It buys you time, but it doesn't buy you truth. And I still had a treason charge hanging over my head that had nothing to do with Tuesdays and everything to do with somebody wanting me gone. Your Majesty, I said, once the silence had stretched long enough to feel like a held breath. I understand this phrase carries weight I wasn't fully aware of. I'll be honest with you, because I think honesty is the only thing that's going to get either of us out of this room with our dignity intact. I don't fully know what it means to your people, but I do know this. I did not transmit any fleet data to the Threll Combine 3 nights ago or any other night, and I'd like the chance to prove that before this court decides what day, if any, to schedule my execution. That got a murmur. The Queen settled back into her throne, though her eye, both of them, independently, stayed locked on. The evidence is logged, Lord Vren said, quickly, too quickly. The confidence from earlier fraying at the edges, now that the room's attention wasn't singularly focused on my apparent supernatural calendar threats. Transmission origin, embassy array, cycle rotation 4, cycle rotation 4, I repeated. Which is your equivalent of, let me check, Earth Standard Sunday evening into Monday morning, if I've been keeping the conversion right in my head. Lord Vren, where were you on cycle rotation 4? His scaled throat rippled, the Vashtarai equivalent of a flinch. That is irrelevant. The question is your whereabouts, not mine. It's relevant if you're the one who logged the evidence, I said. See, here's my problem, Your Majesty. I've had exactly one visitor to the embassy's communication suite in the past 2 weeks who wasn't embassy staff. That visitor came during a scheduled trade courtesy. That visitor was Lord Vren Callistor. whose trade proposal I rejected 4 months ago in this very chamber, and who has, by my count, brought up that rejection in council session no fewer than 6 times since. I have the visitor log. I'd like them pulled. You accuse a council lord of fabricating treason evidence? Vren's voice cracked slightly, the register slipping. I'm not accusing anyone of anything, I said, mild as milk. I'm asking for logs. If I'm wrong, they'll show it. If I'm right, they'll show that too. Seems like the fair way to settle it, doesn't it? Rather than, say, skipping straight to old rights and awkward scheduling conversations about Tuesday. Queen Thessaline's attention swung toward Vren with the unhurried, deliberate weight of a woman who had just realized she'd nearly authorized an execution based on evidence from a man with an obvious grudge. Pull the visitor log, she said. Now, it took 11 minutes. I know because I counted every one of them, standing very still in the center of that chamber, doing my absolute best not to look like a man whose entire future currently depended on whether an alien bureaucratic record-keeping system was as thorough as advertised. It was. The logs confirmed Vren's visit to the embassy on cycle rotation 4 at an hour when embassy staff were at minimal presence, and the communication array's automated logging, which recorded transmissions but, crucially, not the specific terminal or credential used to send them, would have made it trivial for anyone with brief physical access to route a data packet through my system's outgoing signature, a guest badge, a 10-minute window. That was all it took. It also turned up something Vren clearly hadn't accounted for: an embassy security drone, standard passive surveillance, that had captured a partial audio log of him alone in the communication suite, murmuring what the court's own translation specialist confirmed, once played back, was a rough recitation of Threll Combine fleet designation. Rehearsing what he was about to send, the chamber went silent again. A different kind of silent. The kind where you can feel a man's career, and possibly his freedom, evaporating in real time. Queen Thessaline Vorkethrin stood. All conversations stopped instantly, the way 100 conversations stop when the person who can end all of them decides to speak. Lord Vren Callistor, he said, you will be remanded for formal investigation into treason against this dominion, sabotage of diplomatic relations, and attempted judicial murder of a foreign ambassador through fabricated evidence. Take him. 2 of the 11 guards, the same 2 who'd flinched away from me earlier, moved with visible relief to escort Vren from the chamber. He didn't resist. He didn't say anything at all. There's a particular kind of quiet that settles over a man once every clever plan he's built has collapsed in front of the one audience that mattered, and he wore it like a second skin all the way to the door. Once they'd closed behind him, the Queen turned back to me, and for the first time since I'd entered the chamber, some of the formal iron went out of her posture. Ambassador Ashdown, she said, I owe you an apology on behalf of this court. We came within a rotation of executing an innocent envoy on the word of an ambitious noble's forged evidence. That failure sits with us, not with you. I appreciate that, Your Majesty, I said, though I'll admit I've had smoother Tuesday. A ripple went through the remaining council members. Not quite laughter. Vashtarai don't really do that the way we do, but something adjacent to it. A kind of tension release exhale that traveled the room like wind through tall grass. The Queen's obsidian eyes studied me for a long moment. About that, she said, the phrase, the one you invoked. I would ask you, Ambassador, human too, whatever authority you answer to, plainly, was that a genuine warning? Or was it, as I am beginning to suspect, something your species says without such weighty intent? I could have lied. Diplomats lie for a living, in the nicest possible way, and a good lie here might have bought humanity a permanent, terrifying reputation across an entire alien court that would make future negotiations considerably easier. It was tempting. I want to be honest about this, but I'd just watched a man nearly get me killed with a fabricated story, and something about doing the same thing myself, even by omission, even for a good cause, didn't sit right with me. Your Majesty, I said, I'll be straight with you, because I think you've earned that after today, and honestly, so have I. Humans have a complicated relationship with the start of the working cycle. Tuesday specifically carries a certain cultural weight. Bad coffee, bad meetings, general misfortune. It's mostly a joke. I didn't know until about 10 minutes ago that it meant something entirely different to your people, tied to an incident I wasn't aware of, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise to you now. The room went very still again, but this time, I noted with some relief, in a way that didn't feel like anyone was about to draw a weapon. You are telling me, the Queen said slowly, that an entire tactical adjustment made by our military command, 6 years standing, was built upon a joke about your species disliking the start of the labor cycle. I'm telling you that humans are, on the whole, a species that makes jokes constantly, including in situations your people would consider deeply inappropriate for humor. including, apparently, mid-battle, and that sometimes those jokes get overheard by people who don't have the context to know their jokes. I'm sorry if that's a disappointing answer, but it's the true one. For a moment, I genuinely didn't know how she'd take it. Then Queen Thessaline vor Catherine did something I hadn't seen a Vashtarai monarch do in 11 months of formal proceeding. She laughed. A real one. All 3 registers of her voice tangled together in something warm and startled, and entirely unguarded. 6 years, she said, once she'd recovered. 6 years of contingency planning around your species' feelings toward a day of the week. For what it's worth, I said, I'd leave the contingency plans in place. Doesn't hurt to have them. Just maybe don't tell the fleet commanders. It started as a joke about bad coffee. Let them have the mysteries. The formal charges against me were dropped within the hour, the record amended, and my status restored with full ceremonial apology, which, among the Vashtarai, involved a surprisingly elaborate ritual representation of my diplomatic credential, performed with a level of pageantry that suggested they took the correction of a wrongful accusation exactly as seriously as they'd taken the accusation itself. I appreciated that, honestly. It's rare to see an institution embarrass itself and then actually own it in front of everyone, rather than quietly sweeping it away. Lord Vren Calastor's investigation concluded 3 weeks later. Forged transmission law, a fabricated data trail, and a recorded confession once faced with the security drone footage. There wasn't much room left for him to maneuver. He was stripped of his council seat and exiled to an administrative post on a mining colony so far from the capital that, as one council member dryly noted, he'd have plenty of time to reflect on cycle rotations of every kind. The Threll Combines, once informed their name, had been dragged into a domestic political assassination attempt against a foreign ambassador, were furious on my behalf in a way that did more for interspecies goodwill in one afternoon than 4 months of trade negotiations had managed. Turns out nothing unites rival factions quite like mutual outrage at a third party's incompetence. And the phrase, "not on a Tuesday, not today," became something of a quiet legend across the Dominion's diplomatic corps. I heard, months later, that a junior officer serving on a border patrol vessel had used it, half as a joke, during a tense standoff with a smuggling vessel, and that the smugglers had disengaged without a shot fired. Whether that was because the phrase carried genuine tactical weight in Vashtarai military culture, or because everyone involved had simply heard enough stories about humans and Tuesdays to decide the risk wasn't worth finding out firsthand, I couldn't tell you. I never corrected the record beyond what I'd told the Queen that day. Some things are more useful left slightly mysterious. And besides, it wasn't really a lie. Humans genuinely do hate Tuesday. We've just never before had an entire alien battle fleet quietly reorganize its threat assessments around that fact. As for me, I finished out my term as ambassador without further incident, save for one memorable state dinner where the Queen, 3 glasses into something resembling Vashtarai wines, asked me with great seriousness whether Wednesdays carried similar risk. Just so the Dominion could plan accordingly. I told her Wednesdays were fine. Thursdays, mixed reviews. Fridays, generally excellent. For reasons I did not attempt to explain to a species that had never experienced the specific joy of a work week ending. She had that written down too. Humans, it turns out, don't need superweapons or secret societies to become the most quietly feared species in known space. Sometimes all it takes is one man, one very ordinary joke about the start of the work week, and a room full of people who've heard just enough rumors to believe the joke might not be a joke at all. We really are the scariest thing out. Not because of what we can do, because nobody can ever quite tell when we're kidding.